This video is about Charles Diggs Sr., the father of Charles Diggs Jr., who served for 25 years in the U.S. Congress from Michigan and was a founder of the Congressional Black Caucus. Charles Diggs Sr. was an illustrious businessman. He built Michigan's largest black mortuary. He was a founder of Michigan's first black cemetery and the founder of Michigan's first black insurance company. He helped others to become successful, and along the way, he became a multi-millionaire. My name is Rita Dickerson. I'm a Detroit visual artist. I created this channel because of my lifelong passion for Black history. If there's any copyrighted material in this video, it is allowable under fair use of the 1976 Copyright Act. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel, like this video, and leave a comment down below. Diggs Sr. was born in 1894 in Mississippi to a father who was a minister and a mother who was a school teacher. He was one of 6 children. At the age of 25 in 1919, he traveled to Detroit, met and married Mamie Jones. They would live in several residences in Black Bottom, near downtown Detroit, where, along with Paradise Valley, most Black Detroiters lived at that time. These are images of the old Black Bottom neighborhood. The first business he owned was a shoe repair shop, and in 1921 he opened his first House of Diggs in Paradise Valley at St. Antoine and Adams near the above location. In 1922, their one and only child, Charles Diggs Jr., was born and was delivered by Dr. Robert Greenwich, the founder of Fairview Hospital. And you can learn about him and the hospital from my video dedicated to 8 of Detroit's Black hospitals. As an adult, the younger Diggs would speak fondly about growing up in Black Bottom on Mullet and Russell, across the street from Marcus Garvey's Detroit headquarters, the Universal Negro Improvement Association, or the UNIA. Diggs Sr. was a follower of Garvey, whose group was dedicated to racial pride and economic self-sufficiency. In 1925, he and several other Black businessmen banded together to purchase land on 13 Mile and Ryan in what is now Warren, Michigan, for the first ever Michigan Black-owned cemetery, so Blacks could be buried with respect and with dignity. The designer of the cemetery was Cornelius Henderson, a 1911 graduate of the University of Michigan. He was a structural steel designer. When he was unable to find work in that field, he was hired by the Canadian Bridge Company and worked there for 47 years. During that time, he worked on the Detroit-Windsor Tunnel, the Ambassador Bridge. He also worked in Australia, New Zealand, South America, and the Caribbean. He supervised the construction of steel tubes and also steel trusses and cables. He helped to design and oversee the installation of steel sections on many of these projects. The president of the cemetery for well over 15 years was Dr. Aaron Tootle, who, along with Sidney Barthwell, owned several drugstores in Detroit. According to this advertisement, single graves were $65. Can you imagine? And the home office was at 446 East Warren, which was at Warren and Rush, which is adjacent to what is now the Detroit Medical Center. And that spot is a strip mall now. In 1928, the Diggs family would move to 580 Frederick, the former home of Dunbar Hospital. The hospital had moved further south, and the family would live in this building, and to the left, the House of Diggs mortuary was located. The former Dunbar Hospital and former Diggs home is still standing. In 1933, Charles Diggs was appointed parole commissioner by the governor. In 1936, 38, 40, and 42, he was elected Michigan's state senator. When he arrived at the state capitol in 1936, he had no place to stay because the old Olds Hotel across the street from the Capitol building, where all the other legislators stayed because of his race. Today, the building is known as the George W. Romney Building, where the governor has her office and other key officials. He immediately sprang into action and initiated what became known as the Equal Accommodations Act of 1938, and it became known as Diggs Law, which forbade discrimination based on race or creed. It became a misdemeanor. In 1933, he moved his mortuary business from Frederick Street to 1301 East Warren on the block where the Charles H. Wright Museum now stands. While serving as state senator, he continued to build his business, and later he would buy two buildings on Mack near Hastings, combine them together, and create an even grander House of Diggs. This location was just north of the old Brewster Projects where the Supremes grew up. In 1948, he celebrated 27 years of progress and change. 5 years earlier, he had added the Metropolitan Funeral System to his House of Diggs, and it was proving to be a huge success. Around this time, Diggs, along with well over a dozen other Lansing legislators, were found guilty of accepting bribes for their votes, and he ended up spending a year and a half behind bars. Urban renewal of the 1950s forced him out of his location at Mack and Hastings. It is now occupied by Toland Park in front of the Lexus Velodrome on Mack and Chrysler. After leaving this location, he would expand and enlarge his business and eventually have 4 locations. This one on East Grand Boulevard, which is up for sale now. This one on Dexter, which is now a church. This one in Southwest Detroit, which is now still a funeral home. And this one in what is now Westland and is also still a funeral home. He would eventually have a whole fleet of limousines and open a floor shop and a realty company and buy this palatial home on East Boston Boulevard in Detroit. Diggs was a family man. Here you see him with his wife and their only child, Charles Diggs Jr., on the upper left with 4 of his children. Here he is spending time with more family members. In the late 50s, Diggs would suffer his first stroke and would be a patient at U of M Hospital in Ann Arbor. Here he is with Mrs. Diggs and going through rehab. In the late 60s, he would suffer another stroke and a cerebral hemorrhage. In April 1967, while a patient at Detroit Memorial Hospital in downtown Detroit, he would fall to the street below from his 4th floor room. It would be ruled a suicide. His body would be on view at his Northwest Chapel on Dexter for the many friends, relatives, and fellow Detroiters who he had become somewhat of an icon to. Here are some family members viewing him. He was a small man, only about 5'6", weighing about 140-50 pounds. But to many people, he was larger than life. Mrs. Mamie Diggs is seen here with their son, Charles Diggs Jr. at the funeral, which was held at the old Calvary Baptist Church on Joseph Campbell. Diggs Jr., who also had a mortician's license and who had worked with his father in the business, tried to maintain the house of Diggs for several years, but he finally had to give them up. Most of his time was spent in Washington, D.C., and he eventually opened up his own business in Maryland. Very appropriately, all three, Diggs Jr., Sr., and Mamie Diggs, are all buried at Detroit Memorial Park. Mrs. Diggs would pass in 1985 and Diggs Jr. in 1998. This picture was taken by Sean Shackelford. There are many illustrious people buried at Detroit Memorial Park, like Elijah McCoy, who was a fully certified mechanical engineer who held 57 U.S. patents. As a matter of fact, the cemetery held a special celebration when those two headstones were installed. Richard Austin, a certified public accountant who was Michigan's Secretary of State for 24 years. Florence Ballard, who sang with the Supremes. Felipe Wynn, who sang with the Spinners. Singer Little Willie John. Dr. Roberta Hughes Wright, who was a doctor of philosophy, who held a law degree and was an author, and also the widow of Charles H. Wright, the founder of the Charles H. Wright Museum of African American History here in Detroit. And Michigan Congressman John Conyers, who served for 55 years. Charles Diggs Sr. saw many needs in the Black community, and through hard work, determination, will, and drive, he provided services and jobs for African Americans. He built Michigan's largest Black mortuary and arguably the largest Black-owned mortuary in the country. He was a major founder of Michigan's first Black cemetery. He was founder of a Black insurance company in Michigan. He helped others to become successful and became a multi-millionaire. He was also a politician. What remains today? Detroit Memorial Park Cemetery has expanded. There's now a west side location located in Redford, Michigan, and there's also one in Flint. 4 of the cemeteries that Diggs owned the buildings are still standing. 3 of them are funeral homes under new ownership, and the 4th one is a church. The insurance company was bought up by another company. Thank you so much for watching this video, and I hope you enjoyed it and learned something. Please subscribe to the channel, like the video, and leave a comment down below.